Have you ever wondered if you can build a physique so impressive that people start to question whether you're actually natural or not? Today I'm going to share my journey with my natural hypertrophy program and how it helped me transform my physique with no shortcuts. So my goal was simple: to build a strong aesthetic physique without having to rely on performance enhancing substances. I wanted to train smart, make the most of my workouts and optimize my diet plan for growth. You're also going to learn about my training principles, how I manage my caloric intake, the importance of progressive overload and how I overcame common misconceptions in the gym. I'm going to give you the 5 most important things I did during my natural hypertrophy program, how they work and why I use them. So let's dive into it. So my first point is training to failure with 2 working sets. So one of my main principles that I went into when training for hypertrophy was that I wanted to reach failure, but not with the standard 3 or 4 sets, because the amount of fatigue that would just create on my body would just not allow me to train properly over the next few days for my other muscles. So I decided the best option was potentially to do 2 working sets instead, but reach absolute muscular failure for both sets. So as you guys should know, the closer you train to failure, the more muscle growth you'll see. But then there's also plenty of other studies that say training too much will create too much residual fatigue, which means you won't be able to maximally exert yourself over the coming sessions, thus reducing your hypertrophic stimulus. So pushing each set to my absolute limit with only 2 sets per exercise maximized my hypertrophic stimulus without burning myself out each set. So this approach allowed me to always recover properly before each session whilst keeping my hypertrophic stimulus high throughout the session. And it also made my sessions more enjoyable because I felt like I was working a lot harder than before. So number 2 is exercise selection and redundancy. So instead of overloading my workout with repetitive exercises and movements, I focused on the best isolation exercises for each muscle and targeting each different muscle head of the muscle I'm targeting. Now I know a lot of people say it's kind of pointless or there's not necessarily much need to do exercises that target different heads of the muscle group. However, I beg to differ because targeting the other muscle heads allows a reduction in redundancy for the exercises you're selecting. Because if you just choose to do all preacher curl variations during your arm workout, for example, so you do a cable preacher curl, a dumbbell preacher curl and an easy bar preacher curl, that means the long head of your bicep is going to get so much more hypertrophic stimulus sent to it than the short head of your bicep. And if you do that continuously for a long period of time, that's where you're going to see muscle imbalances or non-rounded muscles, because the short head in this example will be severely underdeveloped. Now obviously you can completely negate this issue by just doing standard neutral curls with any variation you want, but I do think it's important to pick exercises that aren't too redundant and that allow different parts of the muscle you're targeting to get a different stimulus across the week. And using this method allowed me to gradually, progressively overload each muscle I was training, and again, allowed each muscle to grow with each other. So I had a massive reduction in muscle imbalances in my physique where I stand today. And now number 3 is a caloric surplus and progressive overload. Now you might be thinking, why are these 2 paired together? Because one's about nutrition and one's about training. I promise you there is relevance, because when you bulk, obviously you'll be in a caloric surplus, so you have more energy and more remaining calories to put towards your workouts and result in higher muscle gain. Which means if you've got more energy, you're able to progressively overload more consistently and more efficiently than if you're in a caloric maintenance or a caloric deficit. So on top of maintaining a clean caloric surplus in order to fuel my muscle growth and repair, obviously I sticked to consistent and efficient progressive overload. And what I mean by efficient progressive overload is that I'm not increasing the weight too much to where I'm now a step back to where I was before and I've just wasted a session when I could have increased the weight by a proper amount, amount that wasn't too much, and I could have actually got closer to progressing to the next weight up. So it's very important to make sure you are making the most of your bulk. So if you're bulking now or you're thinking about bulking, it's probably a good time to think about strictly implementing progressive overload strategies into your workouts. Now moving on to number 4, it's not chasing the pump or muscle soreness. I always thought that getting a muscle pump was the best thing ever. And yes, it feels great, but it was one of the first things that I realized that if I actually want to make progress, I need to stop training to get a pump, because you get a pump, by flooding loads and loads of blood into the muscles you're working, but that doesn't necessarily cause hypertrophy. And I also realised that after a couple months of not getting sore after my workouts, but I was still making progress, that soreness doesn't necessarily mean I had a good or effective workout in terms of muscle hypertrophy. So whilst it's tempting to think that a muscle pump and muscle soreness are indicators of progress, sometimes they can be, but them alone will not elicit hypertrophy. They are just things that can occur whilst you are still progressing. So instead, you should focus on improvements of form and strength by progressively overloading a proper weight, and during your progressive overloads, you should be focusing on a strict form, and if you implement both of them, you will get a great pump anyway, and who's too fussed about getting sore, because no one really wants that, do they? Now moving on to number 5, it's stretching and warm-ups. So proper warm-ups and stretching were and are essential to keeping my joints healthy and ensuring that my muscles aren't sore after my workouts. So before every workout, I would do dynamic stretches to stretch the muscle whilst I'm moving, and sometimes replicating movements I'm going to do during that workout session. And for my warm-up, I would do a general warm-up like a 10-minute bike ride, for example, just to get the blood pumping and the oxygen around my muscles. But then I would do exercise-specific warm-ups for the first exercise I did of that muscle group. So if I was doing a push day, I'd obviously be doing chest, triceps and shoulders. So for my first exercise and first set of each muscle I'm training, I would do potentially 50% of my working weight, very controlled, allowing a nice stretch just to get blood flowing to them specific muscles. And it was these two things together that massively helped reduce my risk of injury. And also, as you're getting bigger and bigger, your joints will potentially become a bit more stiff, thus reducing your mobility. So I also implemented mobility exercises, particularly for my hips and my shoulders, that really allowed my range of motion for exercises and just my comfort to be better when performing any exercise. So these major attentions to detail allowed me to progressively overload my muscles whilst training hard without any setbacks. So now that you know the core aspects of my training, let's talk about the biggest change I saw after only a few months of my natural hypertrophy program. And that transformative moment was when I noticed my strength and physique were getting dramatically better. I was getting stronger in all my compound movements, and my physique was generally just filling out. I was consistently adding weight to the bar and seeing constant improvements to my physique. And one specific moment stands out, which is where I hit the 200 kilo deadlift, which for me was an amazing feat because I was already going through a really long plateau of not seeing any physical progress in my physique, but also no strength gains. So when I hit that 200 kilos, I realized my natural hypertrophy program was still working. So to recap, by training to failure with 2 working sets, avoiding redundant exercises, maintaining a clean caloric surplus, and focusing on progressive overload, I saw incredible natural muscle gains. Adding the approach of not chasing a pump or muscle soreness, and implementing an effective stretching and warm-up routine, you have a well-rounded program for hypertrophy. Have you tried a natural hypertrophy program like this? Let me know your thoughts and experiences in the comments. I would love to hear them. If you like videos like this, I've put 3 of my most popular science-backed informative videos. You should definitely take a look at them. I'm sure you'll love them. If you're new around here and you're not subscribed, which a massive chunk of you are not, which I'll never understand, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you get notified every time I post, which is twice a week at the minute. And if you like this video in particular, make sure you smash that thumbs up button. Lets me know you enjoyed these videos. Anyway, that's it for this one, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.